Once again, welcome to AI Adoption and the Changing Landscape of Business. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Fernanda Correa, and I'm Business Development at Spring to Innovation, and I'll be helping out with the webinar today. We hope you get a lot of value out of the session and enjoy the content, whether you're watching this live or on demand. Before I talk about our speakers today, I want to launch a little poll here to check how you guys are using AI. How frequently do you use AI? I'll stop sharing for a moment. So do you use AI 1 to 5 times a day, 6 to 15 times a day, more than 15 times a day, or not at all? We're just going to give it a few more seconds. Okay, I think 60 people are still voting. Okay, so most of you, I'll end the poll. So 66% usually use it occasionally, 1 to 5 times a day. That is great. So you're using it. That's what's important. And I think Rob will be able to talk a little bit more about that. So let me introduce him. Rob is a Canadian entrepreneur, digital advisor, and AI innovator with over 20 years of experience helping organizations harness technology for growth. As co-founder of HWarp, Rob specializes in AI, cybersecurity, and digital transformation, working with startups and enterprises to drive productivity and protect critical data infrastructure. Talking to Rob, we have Nilofer Erdebil, our founder and CEO of Spring to Innovation. She's a TEDx Ottawa speaker and the author of the international best-selling book, Future Proofing by Design. She has dedicated her career to helping organizations achieve remarkable advancements through design thinking principles. So with that, I'll pass it over to Nilofer to start talking with Rob. Thank you.
Thanks, Fernanda, and thank you, Rob, for coming in, chatting with us, and thanks everyone for joining in. I'm excited to have Rob on our webinars. Rob and I have actually known each other for quite some time. I think, Rob, we met, oh my God, at least 10 years ago.
I believe so.
Yeah.
We have, I'm realizing I have a lot of 15-year anniversaries with people.
Yeah.
That it tends to give me a sense of how old I am when I feel like I'm a lot younger.
Well, I always think of you as a serial entrepreneur because you've had so many different businesses, and now you're in the AI zone, which is amazing to see. So that's why I'm so happy you're here to tell us a little bit more about what's going on with AI. Especially, maybe we can start out with your thoughts on what the art of the possible is with AI and what's happening with AI globally and AI in Canada as well, too.
So AI is a transformative power. So whenever we talk about what has happened with society over these major revolutions, you know, the most common one is industrial. We look at the internet era, we look at mobile phones, and now we have AI. If you talk to most people, what they would say is it's an exponential multiplier. AI changes the entire game because it's not a device. It's not a software. It's actually a brain. So you have this co-pilot in your life that can be used not just for your professional work, but also your personal life, for training, for education. It's going to change how we live. So very few times have you ever been part of something that is so exciting that it will drastically change your life. But with that comes risk, and with that also comes responsibility. And you'll notice that globally, the investment race has been triggered by trying to get ahead of AI as a national security measure. So we see a lot of countries like the US and China investing heavily into AI and using it as a position for their future. You'll see how these countries now are even mandating it in curriculum and education. So the unprecedented speed of AI globally is something that all of us Canadians need to be aware of, and we need to make sure that we're not left behind.
Yeah, so true. And I think just seeing the stats from the survey earlier, the number of people that are using it on a daily basis, like for myself, I used it personally this morning to, there was a quote that I was thinking of, and I knew the name of the book, but I didn't know the quote. And so I just looked it up in ChatGPT, and it gave me the quote as well as how people interpreted the meaning of the quote as well, too. And that is all brand new. I would have had to go find the book, read through a lot of it, and hope that I underlined parts of it. But yeah, it's making things reality that we couldn't even imagine before.
And who would have thought that we would be in a time now where Google was archaic?
Yeah, yeah,
It's incredible when you had something so powerful that was at the palm of your finger where you can access all the knowledge in the world.
yeah,
Now we have knowledge plus context, which is also fueled by artificial intelligence, which allows you to get way more per query than you've ever got in your life. And every search is essentially the entire knowledge base of humanity. So
yeah.
the scale of what information we're served is completely hard to imagine and to accept almost. And I find it's both beautiful and terrifying at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Maybe you could chat a little bit more about AI in Canada and what we can do to maybe ensure that it's being used properly or in a safe type of an environment. What are some things to think about? What are your thoughts on it?
So we started very strong with AI as a leader in AI research, but our business adoption is lagging. So we are at about 14% relative to the US, which is understanding we need to control our data. And data has been put in a position where we took it for granted. We usually believe that it's something that it doesn't matter where it resides. We don't necessarily care about the implications of storing it in other countries. And data security is essentially equals national security. So it's something that we have to change our mindset around, the Google clouds, the Azures. We have to make sure that we respect the fact that we need to have data locality. The other thing is infrastructure needs investment. So for us to be successful, you look at the federal investment of 2 billion, which some would say is significant, is not. And when you look at the private level of investment in the US, which is over 100 billion, you look at in China, it's over 40 billion. We need to increase our compute power and domestic capacity. I believe we are a land that has ultimate superpowers when it comes to hydro and powering huge data centers. So I think we need to innovate and we need to be put in a position where we're critically thinking about the future of Canada um, through how we can succeed in creating a stronger Canadian future through AI.
Yeah, I love that. Where the data is being stored, where it's being touched as well and processed along the way too. You mentioned some really great stats earlier, but you cut out for a little bit. Would you mind repeating the comparison with the US stats that you mentioned?
Yes. So when it comes to general AI adoption, and this is across all ranges of ages, Canada is about 14% relative to the US, which is 30%, and
Wow.
China is 40%.
Oh my
So
God.
to catch up to those numbers, it could take 5 to 6 years of intense programming and government support. So it needs to be something that we as Canadians are not mandated to do. We need to actually adopt it as a core principle. And hence why when you think about why the US and China are making it mandatory as part of curriculum is because when you understand what this tool can do in terms of productivity, in terms of learning, you either adopt or you're going to be left behind, which then becomes a risk to progress and productivity for our future.
I love that. Yeah, and you hit it quite well, is some people are a little bit more hesitant to use it, especially as a leader, but huge gains in terms of learning and from a productivity perspective. I tried to help one of my kids last week with their science homework, and I love science, and I think I'm good at science, but I was reading over the question and thinking to myself, trying to remember what I studied 25 plus years ago. And he's like, no, this is taking too long. I'm just going to use ChatGPT, and used it. And he was able to do it a lot faster than me doing that memory recall. And I think we're going to get more and more of that becoming commonplace for as adults as well too, because think about when Google first came, we had to actually learn how to do search, and now we're in the same frame of mind in terms of how do we use AI, when do we use it, and what are some best practices for it. And so when we're talking about AI, it's sometimes confused with some other technologies that are somewhat similar out there. Could you give us like a little bit of a difference between AI and RPA? And for those that don't know RPA, it's robotic process automation.
Sure. So my background has been a lot around working with monolithic systems that are very, I like to say, archaic. These are systems that tend to require a lot of manual human use. And that one person who's maintaining the system has a lot of, let's call it a knowledge monopoly on how to do things within the system. The system is typically designed poorly. There are challenges to upgrading these legacy systems. And what we built in the past was what we call robotic process automation, where it takes a human action and creates rules around it and automates it so that the human doesn't need to do it anymore, because the system is still needed, but it still needs to be done in a fashion where we can extract that information because it's not necessary for a human to do it. What has now happened is you take something like this robotic process automation and you tie it with AI and agents. It now creates this conditional dynamic logic where an AI can discern between different rules based on the context in which it's served. So let's look at a legacy system. You have an old, I don't know, let's call it an archive system in your organization, and this is something you need to extract legacy data from. The data model is extremely complicated. How do you discern, one, how is it structured? How do you take that data out? How do you then normalize it and put it into a new system without buying or procuring a new system? So this is where AI is at its finest, because when you think of it through a human-centered design approach, you have the person who understands the functional business requirements, and then you have AI that can support any of the technical requirements. So you're almost marrying two sides that typically were very difficult to work together through a tool that can help get it done. In my context, electronic health records is a perfect example. These systems are traditionally very difficult to take data out and serve it in a way that is aggregate, where I can take information from different systems and get my patient record for say, my mom in a way that she can actually understand and interpret it, and it doesn't cost an arm and a leg to do so. So it expedites the discoverability from systems that traditionally are not built to make it easy for you to access that data and aggregate the information associated to it.
I love that. And I know you and I have chatted before in the past about how there's huge opportunities for organizations with so many legacy systems to pull back and think of their organization from a service level, and then create AI on top of the existing data so that they can actually create better services on top of it, and also be able to migrate some of that data more effectively in a way that's going to allow more meaning to come out of that information. And I want to ask you a little bit about your current or your company. And at the same time, we had a comment to someone asking about if you could speak a little bit about AI tools. Everybody talks about ChatGPT, but Copilot seems to produce more thoughtful results. And so maybe a couple comments on both of those.
Sure. So I launched so the exciting thing about my what I call my new experiment is I wanted to build a company that solves a problem for clinic owners, specifically as it comes to reporting. And if anyone is familiar or works with someone who is a clinic owner, is a partner of a clinic owner, you have two lives. You have your clinical work, and you also have your business administration back office work. And it's very hard to be great at both of those. So one tends to struggle. So I firmly believe if you build tools that are powered by AI, you can co-pilot, if you will, the requirements a clinic owner needs to see how they're performing, how the clinic is doing in terms of financial and operational standpoint, and you can collect a lot of information that traditionally is very hard for a clinic owner to do. So generally it's like I have multiple spreadsheets. Those spreadsheets have pivot tables. I'm looking through data. I'm trying to determine what something means associated to the other. With spreadsheets, as we know, it doesn't have very good historical tracking. So it takes a lot of the context that exists in how people work within their current workflows and makes it a lot easier, saves them time, and ultimately gives them opportunity to make the right decisions. So when it comes to AI tools, there are so many. So I want to first let everyone know that it is overwhelming. And even AI specialists who are working in this field, who are obsessed about trying to create a rubric or a matrix of every AI tool out there, can't keep up. And largely because this is, again, we're talking about a new type of technical revolution. What my advice is typically, you just need to understand who are the key players. And again, it always goes back to understanding what your use case is and focusing on first principle problems. So ignore tools. I want everyone who is part of this webinar to not worry about tools. Solutioning is not what you need. You need to understand everything now is a design thinking problem. You have to assume that from a technical standpoint, everything will be done that you can never finish before. You have the ultimate tool for technical implementation, but you don't have that human element, the human-centered design element, where you have to critically think about what problem you're solving. So if you do not know the problem you're solving, if you're not in a situation where you're clearly articulating the outline of how you're going to solve this problem, without any systems, tools, it's irrelevant. So when someone says, what tool should I be using? Let's start first with the problem. The problem space is something that we've struggled with endlessly in society and in government, in private sector. And I would double down on learning how to actually identify the problem space better than to spend time on understanding the solution and the tools that are going to be helping you. That to be said, there will be always better tools to help you drive once you understand from a design thinking perspective what you need to do and how to do it. I'll give you a very quick example so I can let Neil talk, but archaic system 2002 using Windows, it's using a server that's dated, it has a database that's dated. That is a perfect problem where design thinking can come in and you can actually figure out how you don't need to procure a new system. You can actually build an abstract system that will support the functions needed for that tool to do what it needs while you're transitioning or procuring a new system. So in the traditional sense, most people think you need to swap. No, you need to rethink. So I feel like I'm very adamant about when we get into this whole world of what AI tools are going to help me, the focus should not be on the tool. The focus should be on the problem. And then you can easily figure out the tools. The tools are the easiest part. The technical implementation side now with AI is easier than ever. You can use natural language to get things done. And as a perfect example, with what I'm doing with provider.app, that is a 1 to 2 person company. And if I could show you the code base, the complexity of what we've built, it would amaze you because, like I said, it's allowing someone to have a canvas, but the engine to produce is infinite. So as long as the human element is there and you're focusing on understanding first principles, you can critically think, you can think spatially, I would say that the tools become irrelevant.
Yeah,
It's a little bit of a
Yeah. It, and I think it's going to take a little while for some folks to process. I had the opportunity to watch a demo of your tool and then see you starting to make some changes in other code as well, using a suite of AI tools. And so it's not just one, it's what's your problem? And then what are the tools available out there to help pull that all together. And we're not even chatting about AI agents yet either.
Yeah. And to not avoid the question, I think I would always map out what job is to be done, and then with each of those jobs to be done, you can use a specific tool. Let's say, for example, Chat GPT. Different models work at different capacities, and they support different things much better than other. So if you're actually looking at creative thinking, O3 is incredible. 4.0 is very strong now, or 4.1, if you will. If you want to use computational stuff, there's a series of models that work with data that are fantastic. If you're looking for larger context windows, you may want to use something like a Gemini. There's several LLMs that you can match with different stacks in different libraries that will help you achieve an outcome. So it's really dependent on what you're trying to do and the job you're trying to get done. If you're
Yeah.
learning, I would say the best thing to do is just stick with one LLM and kind of navigate through a constructive process on how to learn something at a very deep level. I still recommend doing free courses. I know that Microsoft has rolled out free courses, LinkedIn has rolled out free courses, Stanford has rolled out different free courses. What we'll do, Neil, I believe you and I talked about this, when the webinar is done, we'll share as much as we can for everyone who's attended. And I have endless amounts of different free links and resources and PDFs and white papers that you can read to learn as much as you can.
And there's a really great comment in the chat as well, too, that makes me think that sometimes in the organizations that you work with, there's certain ones that you need to be using. And so we'll chat a little bit more later on, too, in terms of how AIs work. There's publicly available ones, there is more private ones. And so at the end of the day, in your work environment, you might only be able to go with one. And then it's also how well do some of these AIs adhere to existing compliance and data privacy regulations as well, too. So thank you so much for that comment around there. One other thing that I was thinking of as you were talking, Rob, too, that we chatted about earlier is how easy it's going to be to develop SaaS companies with AI, or is currently really easy to create SaaS companies using all the different AIs and pulling them together as well, too, so that it's going to become a commodity. And what's going to differentiate businesses is that human component of it and the ability to select the type of problem that they're going to go after, and then the experience for their end users.
Yeah, and just to add what you said, we have been in the attention economy for a long time. With all of this noise, it's going to become harder and harder. Yes, it is easier to build a tool, but it's much harder to acquire someone's ongoing attention. So it comes down to the same paradigm as always: is can you create enough value? And what AI has allowed is experimentation at a supercharged rate, which means that now, instead of actually being in a position where you have to go through a long cycle of development, you can go through extremely short iterative cycles, listen to your user, understand their problem, and get deep into a problem space where initially the cost would have been too much to go through these so many iterations. So the main benefit is you actually get to iterate on a specific problem without being in a position where you can't invest more resources because the cost to develop it has gone down significantly.
Yeah, definitely. And we started chatting a little bit about this, so maybe I can ask the question right now too. What's happening in terms of understanding the different LLMs? What does it take to keep them current?
So right now, I would say there's a few challenges, of course. When you think about the OpenAI model, they are working really hard to not create any policies that will stop from ingestion of all copyrighted sources. So obviously, the larger knowledge base you have, the more content you take, if you will, the more information that your LLM can learn from and essentially be used as part of its tool. What is necessarily going to happen is, and I always say that this is important, we need to have Canadian specific LLMs. So in a perfect example, there is an enterprise company called Cohere, and they focus on, they are a Canadian enterprise company. So it allows people who are, potentially have data integrity concerns to use a Canadian-based LLM where data stays in Canada. So I think when it comes to maintaining LLMs, the current Wild West approach will eventually fade away, and then it will become extremely important that the data that it's being trained on is not steadily available to everyone and being abused. So what, part of the philosophy is, every large player who has any of these large language models are going to eventually need to update their models. They're going to have to keep on retraining it, fine-tuning it, but there's going to be a cap at how much data is going to be able to be acquired. And when that point happens, then it's going to come down to, okay, we have all the infinite knowledge in the world, but how do we create utility around it so that it actually can serve people more effectively? So retraining data should be hyper-focused on data locality. So I think that models now today are hyper efficient. You have open source models that you can train with Canadian servers, with Canadian systems. I think that there is a huge opportunity for businesses in Canada to both support managed services that provide AI clusters, but also to create custom LLMs that are specific to an industry or niche or a specific job to be done. And I think that's above and beyond agents, but I think it first starts with the backbone of creating hyper-focused data localized LLMs that can be also turned off from the internet when it's needed. I see a large movement of local LLMs where they run on local machines with a small footprint that still accomplish a lot, and then do essentially analytics to cloud systems. So I think there's going to be a hybrid mix of hybrid systems where you have cloud-based and localized systems. I don't believe there's going to be one leading LLM provider. I just don't think that. I think there'll be a lot of agents that will use different LLMs, but I think it's going to become such a question of data integrity and security that there's always going to be preference on where that LLM stores its data and where the data is transferred, and is it secured at rest.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask a little bit, we touched on it earlier, is adopting AI to improve productivity. Could you give some examples of what some companies are doing in terms of using AI to increase productivity?
Yeah, so everyone is probably aware of Shopify's stance on AI for productivity, where there was a letter that was leaked, which advocated for every single person before you hire a new potential person in your organization, new talent, you have to prove why AI can't do that job instead. I feel like part of my challenge with this is, number one, I believe there's a huge human centricity to AI. AI doesn't live in a void or a vacuum without people. So by saying that, if AI can do this job, or you have to advocate that AI can only do this job or not, I feel like you're kind of missing a very important point, where AI augmented is there's a big difference between automation and augmentation. And I believe that every single person in our modern and future workforce is going to be augmented by AI. So it's not a if or then, it's actually, how do you use AI? How can you make it more impactful? And how are you collectively with your AI tools going to bring value to the workforce? So I feel like it's a little bit misguided, where it's an efficiency play, where I don't want to hire someone unless they're using AI to increase throughput. But I do fundamentally believe there are going to be people that the stack of which they can bring value, create value and productivity to their to a new organization or their existing organization, is going to be paired with different AI tools, AI agents, and so on.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Maybe we can enhance that a little bit more too, and talk a little bit more about other concerns that you have with AI, like around governance, bias, policy.
So this is a very important one to me, because I feel like anytime I've ever talked about EDI, and there's a lot of issues associated to generalizing strategy around why diversity is important. When I think about governance for AI, there is such a significant risk around bias, because the people that create the LLMs, who fine tune these LLMs, are humans. And as we know, humans aren't perfect, and they're going to create a tool that is representative of themselves. So the only way to protect that is to ensure that we have a model that is a bias risk model. And I fundamentally believe that every AI has inherent biases. It amplifies societal inequities. It requires rigorous testing, and you need mitigation strategies around this. So if fundamentally your country believes something, your AI is going to be the same thing. The people don't understand that it is an extreme risk. And now when we go back to what we talked about, Neil, where you used to use Google, and Google would search for, websites were controlled by people. So it was one to many. Now you're doing a lot of one-to-one associations when you're searching in an LLM. And the LLM is the one that is actually creating the context, creating the response based on information it's acquired, or it's filtered out. So I think, when it comes to bias, it scares me a lot.
Yeah.
And I think it largely because you're seeing what's happening in the world of
Yeah,
control
absolutely.
and mitigating messages. You think about, like, a perfect example of X, the platform, which is now going to be Grok, which you can filter and control how people are communicated to. And you can filter out ideas, you can filter out different types of people, you can influence different segments. It is a tool for mass manipulation. So we have to be extremely cognizant that that's exactly what is happening, and we have to be able to create guardrails and ways to protect against that. I think another concern is, you look at Canada's law, where we had AIDA, which is, I think in January was shot down, 2025. We need strong internal governance initiatives and frameworks, and policy. So if we right now we're all relying on a voluntary code, we have things like privacy laws like PIPEDA, but these lack teeth and dedicated legislation. So I believe that we need to really be smart about how we think about what AI's role will be in our Canadian society, and make sure that we prevent it to go off the rails.
Absolutely. And you touched a bit on it, that some of these AIs are open source. And so what that means is that many different people are coding on it. And there are people that are coordinating things and pulling it all together. But at the end of the day, the code is based on the people that have developed it. And if you think about the types of people that are part of open source coding projects. It's something that was brought to my attention last fall at a conference. It's usually a lot of men in there as well too. And so how much gender bias is in the coding, as well as you mentioned, like from a cultural country perspective, what are the biases that are being put in there too? And then the risk as well of people not necessarily thinking and just putting it into ChatGPT and saying it'll tell me. And I see it a little bit as kids are doing their homework too. Let's figure out what ChatGPT is going to give us. Sometimes it's the start, sometimes that's all that's being delivered. And so how do we put in guardrails as well to help people better understand how they can use it, but also when they need to use their own thinking, and to really watch out for those biases.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think very much like we had to do parental controls with content, we have to do parental controls with AI. I
Yeah.
think that we need to set parameters when an underage youth is using AI, similar to the parameters we have, but even more so, because you could have an epidemic of predatory practices because it's largely influential because it will do whatever the person who's controlling it tells them to do.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to have to be, education at all levels, which is
Yes.
important, but also there needs to be, in Malaysia, they have an extremely sophisticated AI initiative, and they differentiate between what they call signs and guardrails. And signs are things that are like policies, rules, but they have guardrails, which are kill switches. Like, what if something does X? Unfortunately, Canada does not have any of those because usually those things are not created until an event happens. So, I would like to assume that it would be smart for us to be able to be a little bit more proactive, and not watching this happen and then reacting and being a little bit more preventative. So, creating policy that enables us to create those signs and then the guardrails ahead of time and iterate on that versus waiting until something happens to make that decision, I think is an important one.
Yeah, absolutely. And the best way for parents to be part of that guardrail too is to learn and experiment themselves, and then to be able to understand what kids are doing, what other people in your organization are doing, and there is a lot of learning involved as part of that. It's AI and LLM literacy, but the world has shifted, whether we want it to or not. And so, what are some of the things that you could be doing to make sure that at work and in your personal lives at home with kids, what can you do to stay on top of it? And it's just that experimentation component of it, and being open to having some of those conversations with kids in your work environments as well too. And
Absolutely.
and there's going to be shifts in terms of what people are hiring for. So not just in terms of people that can use AI, but also in making sure that there are different practices in terms of even developing software using AI as well too. Could you, Rob, comment a little bit more about the design principles and also creativity and requirements gathering becoming the bottleneck for organizations?
So when I always love talking about this, Neil, because when I went to university, it was, and I'm assuming most people that have Eastern European parents were in the same boat, where engineering, doctor, or an accountant were really the only paths you can choose, and skilled labor was not something that was on the top of the list. And now that these knowledge professions are becoming commoditized, now they're not going to be redundant because the reality is, again, human intervention with humans working with AI is going to be the future. I don't think it's going to be one or the other. But I fundamentally believe that it's changing drastically how we have to work on different types of challenges. So when we think about a project that I worked on in the past, scoping was always, I would say, 15% of the project, because we knew that the level of investment once we go into implementation mode was so high that we needed to leave a lot of budget for making sure that we don't make the mistakes during the actual implementation phase. However, now it's the scoping is 50% of the project because the implementation phase now has the tools and supports required that previously didn't exist, because it is more costly and more valuable for someone to know how to creatively scope, to think about a system, think about system design, think about how they want to create the system before they go into implementation mode, because the implementation mode is now the fast part. And that's a paradigm shift in how we work. And I think it's actually very interesting because it should be the way we've been doing things all along. But I think in any capitalistic system, as well as myself, you want to get a delivery done as fast as possible. So you cut short the need for planning and scoping, and you try to get to action. Let's just do it. And then you realize that, okay, you've hired too many consultants. You haven't really thought this through. This project's never going to be successful. and you're too deep into it and you've just blown a whole bunch of money and a whole bunch of budget. So I think it's going to force planning to be where it should have always been, at the forefront, at the beginning, at the middle, at the end. And every project has to. There's no more, let's scope it and deliver it. It's going to be done in parallel, and you're always going to be in a situation now where a project will be organic. The plans will iterate just as much as the implementation will, and they will be budgeted and there'll be adjustments associated to that. Did I answer that question?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I have an answer to my next question, but I'd love to hear yours. And I know you touched on it, is how do you think AI and design thinking work well together? And maybe some comments in terms of how you bring some of that in your product for your company.
So we're designing for people. So when I think about what I'm doing for, let's talk about provider. I'm designing for providers who are clinicians who are helping people. And part of the reinforcement mechanism when you design a good system is to reward people when they're doing good things. And when you don't allow people to see the good things they're doing, or it makes it really hard through reports or that traditional way to acknowledge when someone is doing well, you're missing a lot of value creation and the ability to get your employees very excited about progress and understanding how much value they're creating for whoever they're serving. In the context of provider, what we do is we automate what we call a provider scorecard, which allows a provider to see every month, how many positive reviews they've had. We do sentiment analysis on their patients. We determine if after a certain amount of treatments, if the patients are canceling, because obviously it's an indicator. If you go to three treatments and they are always dropping off, it might be a provider challenge. And then we also talk about the economics behind a provider, because a lot of them are commission-based employees. So by presenting the data in an honest and transparent way, it allows providers to determine where their gaps are without having any subjectivity. And I think when you remove subjectivity from the conversation of personal development and progress in your career, it allows you to be disciplined to improve things and actually get yourself to be better. And I think once you remove that subjectivity, it's no longer emotional, and it's like, okay, these are the things I need to do to, create more value for the people I'm serving and to ultimately make more money. And I feel like that's a really interesting concept that was much harder to do pre-AI. What we've realized is, whenever there's nuanced information that's very difficult to collect, AI does a great job of that. And as long as we do it without bias, it can create a lot of value. So I think human-centered design is around everything to do with AI, because fundamentally the whole apparatus we're building for the AI ecosystem is for people. And if we think about how we can make a person's life better through utilities, through systems, and not just think about the tool itself, we'll achieve a much better, outcome and better society as a result. So that I love working on. I think I was not able to have as much throughput as a entrepreneur as I am now. So now I can actually solve problems that I was dependent on a lot of people before, whereas now I can drive a lot of change. And man, that is a very exciting thing. The fact that I feel like I'm supercharged. I'm now in my mid-40s, and I've never been more motivated to build businesses than I've ever been in my life. Some people may think it's doom and gloom, but I have to tell you, as a creator, I've never been more excited. I talk to people every day, and I'm like, how are you not excited and jumping up and down as a creator? This is the best thing I've ever seen. Yes, there's risks, but at the same time, as an opportunist, I think this is the best time to be alive.
Yeah, I've heard that we now have 1 or 2 person unicorn companies because AI allows people to be creative and then do the things that they want to do rather quickly. And so it is a really exciting time. And at the same time, being aware of what's available out there and how to use it and when to use it too. This might be a really good time to hop into our questions, because we have some really great questions in the Q&A. And if you want, you can feel free to add more questions into the Q&A if you'd like. First question is around, could you speak about how AI helps or hinders the HR staffing process? How do we screen for true talent experience versus candidates using AI to craft the responses for them? It can be difficult to find the human element in a virtual world. Any suggestions?
So the first assumption is everyone's using AI. So I would never screen by assuming there's two worlds: the people that are still using AI, not using AI, and people that are using AI, because one will obfuscate the other. The people that are using AI will come out much brighter, and the people that are not will probably not stick out as much. I think when it comes to critical thinking, as much as I would say that AI can drive a lot of this through the HR process, it can't. So you can crystallize someone's thought pattern by asking them, what type of problems did they solve? Can you explain to me through first principles the hardest problem you solved and how you thought about it and how you went through it? I think a lot of the analytical tests are going to need to change, simply because it's no longer, what it was when I wrote my SAT back in 1999, where I couldn't use a calculator, and it's like, oh, you need to figure out how to do this yourself. There is going to need to be a drastic approach on how do people learn first principles, how do people learn critical thinking, and that will be extended to the hiring process. And I think those questions can be posed in a way where you can see how people think, because fundamentally how people think is how they're going to use AI. So you can pose and present problems, and how they think is actually going to be directly in line to the value they get back from an LLM. So if they have shallow thinking and they don't have spatial thinking, they're probably not going to think through a problem deep enough. So I think you can catch those things through the hiring process. But yes, the reality is now the carpet bombing of getting a whole bunch of applications and hoping to find candidates is probably not going to work anymore, because so many people can use AI to make themselves seem better than they are. So we have to be more critical in the hiring process and have more human intervention in that process than before. Before, we automated the hiring process because we had tools that made it easier for HR, but now that's actually hindering the process because the other side is abusing it just as much.
Yeah, very good point. I think when it comes to critical thinking, that's a huge factor that I think more organizations are looking into as well, with so many tools that are out there. And then also creative thinking too. That's a huge part of what makes organizations innovative. And if you're just using tools for work, there has to be a component of creativity and critical thinking in there, to make sure that things are working together and also to help you stand out too. I know someone asked to elaborate on first principles concept. And as you're doing that too, folks that are on the webinar, I'd love to hear what your thoughts have been so far. We have a couple more questions too, but I'd love to hear your thoughts in terms of so far what you think of the content, if you want something deeper, or if there's other areas that you want to focus in on. Could you just quick comment on what first principles are, Rob?
So it's typically the objective truth around something. So when you pull away all the layers of an assumption, so let's say cognitive biases. So I had several cognitive biases growing up. I had martyrdom, and first principle thinking is, if assuming that this is true, why is it true? Asking second and third order questions, and being able to understand it from the first order of a problem. So in physics, it's like at the very early concept of why something is true or not. So in a lot of thinking nowadays, conventional thinking, you take the leap and you just assume it's true, and you don't actually think about why something is the way it is. So, I would always argue for everyone who uses AI, like, get a little bit of basic understanding of what an LLM is, what this black box of magic is, and just don't use it as a consumer. You want to be eventually a creator, and to truly be a creator, you have to actually understand a little bit of the mechanics behind how things work. So the whole idea behind first principle thinking is making sure you kind of understand how things are happening or things work, the maturation of something, before you're just stating it as fact. And a lot of people will act like they know first principles, or they do first principle thinking is by stating what it is, but they don't actually understand the underlying machination of it.
Great, thank you. That's really good. Question that we have as well is one of our viewers resonates with your comments on AI being biased and AI ultimately representing national values through governance and regulation. Any ideas on how to achieve that AI sovereignty without stifling velocity of innovation?
So I think it has to be a core pillar. One of the things I'm working on is a AI readiness assessment with a focus on kind of trying to be as broad as possible on what is the societal view of someone who is ready for AI. And I think one of the core pillars needs to be governance, ethics, and inclusion. Because if you are not inclusive, there's going to be bias. I always go back to even models need to have diversity. So I don't think it's one or the other. I think velocity is going to happen no matter what because the economic interest. So the question is not a matter of what's going to impede velocity. The question is what is going to support the parallel cultural paradigm that's going to happen, or the shift as a result of bad governance. And if we do not take care of the data, the models, our cultural identity, it will be lost. It just the AI tools are going to get better. They will become self-informed. They will become whatever you want to call it, like super AGI, and that will be a responsibility of humanity if we don't teach it what we want it to be. And so I think velocity is not going to be lost. The economic interests are too high. So I think it's much more of an imperative. How do we make sure that no matter what, as we're progressing through this technological curve, we ensure that there is a layer of governance tied to everything? Because if you look at the economic interests, the economic interests are not aligned to the governance initiatives. They don't want policy. They want to remove policy. They want to remove regulations, largely because they know that data is limited. And once you capture all the data, then you could start forcing regulations and policies down everyone's throats. But I think they need to be done hand in hand because it's important. You need models that are inclusive. You need them to understand what happened in society. We don't want missing parts of history as part of our models. We don't want exclusion to happen selectively. We don't want ideologically formed freaking models. So, and all of this stuff is crazy that I'm even talking about it. That we're in a society where this is such a risk, but it is. So I don't think velocity is the risk. I think the greater risk is not having proper governance in place and making sure it's a mandate with everything, right? With every model that gets created, there needs to be a pillar that's focused on these parameters.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much data that's out there and continues to be built up. Data that we are collecting, data that devices and IoT devices are collecting as well too. And so I'm actually going to bring Fernanda in as well. Next webinar, we're actually going to talk about data. And it is actually a super exciting topic, and it melts really well with the AI conversation we've been having today.
Yes, thank you so much, all of you, for joining. Thank you, Nilofer. Thank you, Rob. I know that we could be talking here about this for like the whole day, but unfortunately we got our time. We will be sharing all the resources in the email and also the link for the next webinar. But for those of you that joined a little bit later, we'd like to share our upcoming courses. So we have in June, we have our When AI Gets Physical, digital physical transformation with Walter Knittel and Nilofer. So it's a great resources for those interested in learning more about AI and also the intersection with IoT. We had a webinar in January about it, so you can take a look into that to understand a little bit more about this. We also have in May our design thinking certification. It's done through 5 days. So we have 3 days up front. Then you go back into your work environment, use all the tools you learn, and then come back for the final 2 days. We also have in June a new one, which is our advanced design thinking. For those that done our design thinking level 1 or our certification, we'll go deeper into more concepts like alignment, mindsets, and strategic foresight. And if you want to do on your own pace, if you just like video lessons and you can take it on your rhythm, we have our introduction to design thinking, and we have it available in English and French. But we'll share all that in a follow-up email with you, as well as the recording of this webinar. We also have a book, Future Proofing by Design by Nilofer. You can find the link in our website. And lots of resources available. We have a LinkedIn group where we can talk to people and share something, share more content about design thinking, and you can ask questions there. The goal is to be a place where you can interact and learn. And we also have our blog post, YouTube channel. So we'll share all those links in a follow-up email. So stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for joining us today. And please reserve 1 minute to reply to our survey and when you log off here, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody. And just wanted to highlight, there's a message in the chat that's really useful too. There's an AIoT Spring Summit coming up May 27th, where there's going to be a panel talking about bias in AI and sovereignty as well. So if you guys are interested, there's a link that was dropped. And thank you so much, Rob, for joining us. And thank you guys for joining us. If there's other stuff that you want to know about AI that we didn't chat about yet, put it into the comments or send us an email as well too. And we'd love to hear more, and we'd love to explore more of the stuff that's on your mind. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.